Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is information@cuandreview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday, the 4th of February, 2026, from the opinion section. Melania the movie is propaganda, but have you seen the BBC recently? This article is by Kevin McKenna. This is the bit where I'm supposed to say I watched Melania so that you all don't have to. I have seen worse, though. The documentary film chronicling the American First Lady's life in the 20 days leading up to her husband's inauguration last year is that curiously rare thing, notorious even before anyone had seen it. Reviews of this movie have been universally bleak, and ticket sales in the UK are sparse. You began looking furtively over your shoulder to check if you'd been spotted heading into Cineworld's Theatre 5 at Silverburn, like the jumpy men in the brown raincoats who used to hang around outside the old classic Grand on Sauchiehall Street before the matinee blue movie Double Bill. How bad could it be, though? It surely couldn't be more tortuous than Everything Everywhere All at Once in 2022, a piece of cinematic chaos that seemed to be about people who'd overdosed on the electric Smarties in a Chinese laundry. The young cinema attendant pops over to ask if I may perhaps have wandered into the wrong movie. Bless her. I'm all on my own in a bijou 21-seater. She tells me that the previous day in Cineworld's Edinburgh complex there had been drama. A member of staff had actually walked off the job in protest at his employer's decision to screen such a dangerous flick. A group who'd arrived to watch another movie turned back when they saw the poster for Melania. This must be serious. In Edinburgh, the staff only walk out when Joanna Cherry makes an appearance. By the time Melania had started, there were 8 of us. 5 blokes and 3 women. Before the opening titles, we're told that there will be mild, bad language, upsetting scenes, and some sex references. So, not all bad then. The reviews, without exception, excoriated Melania. It was just Trumpian propaganda, said most of them. There was little of any substance and nothing that provided even a scintilla of insight into the character of the First Lady. One reviewer detected darkness in the songs chosen for the sound design. Another was troubled by the stilted exchanges between Melania and her husband. Much of this commentary, though, has been performative. Perish the thought that any film about a woman such as this could be any good. What were they expecting, though? Bowling for Columbine, something by Adam Curtis. If we are going to get all lofty and dismissive, let's remind ourselves that the BBC spends millions producing documentaries chronicling the lives of the royal family that break new ground in toadying sycophancy. They make the old Soviet state propaganda productions look edgy and subversive. Their unquestioning obeisance to the multi-billion-pound climate sector daily stretches objectivity. That all said, though, Melania won't engage many of your critical faculties. you'll be no further aware of what Mrs. Trump thinks about the world around her or what she stands for. At one point she talks of her lately departed and beloved mum, and the family values that shaped her growing up in a part of Yugoslavia that is now Slovenia. An opportunity, perhaps, to tell us about her journey from humble beginnings to a hat brim away from the presidency. She chose not to. Her man flits in and out of the picture and looks almost human and statesmanly. Then you remind yourself that this is really a very highly refined piece of propaganda. The BBC have been doing it for decades in the way they tried to convince us for years that the dysfunctional and creepy Windsors were really just like us. Melania also spends a lot of time with her fashion team because, well, there are about a dozen inauguration events she must attend. I take my cue from Stanley Tucci's Nigel in The Devil Wears Prada, when elegant women are making their couture choices. Give me a ballerina skirt and a hint of saloon, and I'm on board. With Melania, the moment came when she was choosing the inauguration hat. This was a rather glorious and sexy black and white brimmer that she wore with her hair in a bun. It rocked Argentinian gaucho chic and was different class. It outshone everything else on Inauguration Day. There was a moment, too, when she walked into New York St. Patrick's Cathedral in a pair of Louboutin stilettos, so vertiginous that I swear to God some of those old stone saints were sweating. At the other end of my row, 3 women were singing along softly to Spandau Ballet's True. I bought a ticket to the world, but now I've come back again. Why do I find it hard to write the next line? Oh, I want the truth to be said. Whoever wrote the script for Melania was obviously influenced by Gary Kemp's thoughtful etude. One of these young women, Sabir, is Israeli-born and lives in Scotland after coming here to study. I tell her that I'd been moved by the film's only poignant moment. This is when Melania meets Aviva Siegel, an Israeli woman who was taken hostage during the Hamas atrocities on the 7th of October 2023. Her husband Keith was still in underground captivity, though later released. As Miss Siegel weeps, she is comforted by Melania. I will pray that he doesn't suffer. Sabir isn't impressed, though. Her friends and family are still suffering the effects of the Hamas attacks. It looked to me as though Aviva, in her grief, was a bit exploited to appear in the film, she says. What did she think about the rest of it? She's smart and sassy. What, apart from the fact that the script looked like a bad ChatGPT job, she replies. Towards the end of her home movie, Melania says, The weight of history intertwines with my destiny as an immigrant. No matter where we come from, we are bound by the same humanity. At the same time as its premiere last month, her husband's ICE agents were clearing the streets of less equal immigrants in Minneapolis. That article was by Kevin McKenna.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 5th of February 2026, from the news section. Accused suspected Brian Lowe of planting things in-house. Article written by Grant McCabe. A former head gamekeeper accused of murdering a man once suspected him of planting items allegedly found during a raid on his home. David Campbell was said to have been very angry at the search of the cottage on the Edra estate in Aberfeldy, Perthshire, where both he and Brian Lowe had been employed. The claims were made on Thursday at the 77-year-old's trial at the High Court in Glasgow. Campbell is accused of shooting to death Mr. Lowe, 65, at the Leafy Lane near the Piccadilly track in Aberfeldy, Perth and Kinross on February 16th, 2024. He denies the charge and has lodged a special defensive alibi. Jurors heard from 59-year-old Kerry Colvin, who knew both men from visiting the Edra-Dynasty estate. Campbell had been head gamekeeper there between 1984 and 2018, Mr. Lowe a groundsman from 2000 to 2023. Prosecutor Greg Farrow asked Miss Colvin if Campbell had ever said anything to her about Mr. Lowe that had been concerning him. She replied, "Yes. When Edra-Dynasty had been raided, the police search, David told me that he was very angry that his grandchildren's clothes had been removed from a boot room. He was concerned that Brian had put something in the children's clothes. I cannot remember what it was, but something had been put in the coats that were in the boot room. This would have been prior to 2010. Mr. Farrell went on to put to her, David Campbell suspected that Brian Lowe had planted something in the children's clothing that had been taken by the police. That is what David Campbell was telling you. The witness, who testified from behind screens, replied, Yes. Miss Colvin said he spoke about this more than once with the same tone, anger and annoyance. The trial heard further information about the raid that occurred. A police statement taken from Michael Campbell, the former laird of the Edra-Dynasty estate, in April 2024 was read to jurors by a detective. The 81-year-old has since passed away. Amongst what he told officers was that Mr. Campbell said there had been reports of birds found poisoned on the estate. He stated that there was nothing in his mind to believe Campbell, no relation, had been responsible. But the home of the accused was searched amid claims that led him to eventually being locked up for around 28 hours. Mr. Campbell further remarked, David was really aggrieved about the raid and implied that Brian had planted the stuff in his house. Clothing had been seized. Once it was returned, there were items that did not belong to him, which, again, made him suspicious that someone had planted it. The court heard that before Campbell retired, things had started to go a bit downhill, and that he did not leave the estate on good terms. Jurors also heard from farmer Callum McDermott, whose land covers what his family nicknamed the Leafy Lane. The 56-year-old was out with his wife Nicola on November the 5th, 2023, when they met a local couple and their daughter. They were standing chatting when a cyclist came through between them at high speed. Mr. McDermott said it appeared different from a normal mountain bike. The farmer said he was taken aback and yelled on the rider to stop before briefly running after the person. Mr. Farrell asked the witness if there was anything about the cyclist that caused concern. He replied, To my eye, there was something that stuck out a rucksack. I felt that it could have been a gun. He believed the weapon could even have had a silencer attached. Among the other charges Campbell faces is one of attempting to defeat the ends of justice, which includes a claim that he got 2 replacement tyres fitted on an electric bike in a cycle shop he allegedly used in the murder. The trial, before Lord Scott, continues. That article was written by Grant McCabe and read by Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 5th of February 2026, from the news section. Scottish man who stole identities in £1 million scheme sent to jail. Report by Josh Pizzuzzo-Pomacco. A man who made more than £1 million from a series of identity fraud schemes has been jailed. Craig Milligan stole the identities of 2 men, both of whom had died. He also ran a website selling false IDs for 11 years. The 47-year-old was living in Dumfries under a stolen identity when he was pulled over by police officers while driving in October 2024. After providing false details, police launched an investigation into his finances and background. A subsequent raid on Milligan's house uncovered a large number of bank cards with various names, £10,000 in cash, and false ID documents. ink presses, printers and laminators were also discovered. Milligan pled guilty to the offences in November 2025 and was sentenced to 4 years in prison at the High Court in Glasgow on Thursday. Detective Constable Alan Wells, who led investigations into the man, said, "Milligan was running a sophisticated fraud business, as well as concealing who he actually was for years. He stole the identity of 2 dead men for his own financial gain, without regard for the consequences. This investigation was complex, given the scale of the fraud. Our team, alongside specialist financial investigators and partner agencies, discovered the names he'd been using were of men who had passed away." Wells added, "Following in-depth analysis, we were able to gather enough intelligence to carry out a proactive warrant, uncovering the truth behind Milligan's operation. His conviction and sentencing underlines our commitment to proactive policing and investigation using all available resources, regardless of the extent and complexity of the offending. Financial experts combed through several false bank accounts and discovered that £1,092,998.04 had been paid in between May 2012 and January 2025. Sinead Corrins, Procurator Fiscal at the Crown Procurator Fiscal Service, said, "Craig Milligan has been brought to justice for a calculated and long-running fraud. He callously stole personal and confidential information and used this to fraudulently obtain bank accounts and credit. No matter how complex the fraud, we will investigate it alongside partners and bring offenders to justice." Milligan was found to have stolen the identity of Daniel Pindell, who died in Florida in 2009, and Thomas Warren, who died in Dallas in 2010. A financial investigator established that Milligan held 7 bank cards and 6 credit cards linked to false identities. That report was written by Josh Pusat-Supamako. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 5th of February 2026. From the news section, why Swinney chose Mandelson's mansion over Washington Hotel, by political editor Andrew Learmonth. John Swinney has defended staying with Peter Mandelson on a trip to Washington last year, insisting it was about saving the taxpayer money. The First Minister, his Chief of Staff, Colin McAllister, and his private secretary all stayed at the British Ambassador's residence in Washington, D.C. during talks with President Donald Trump. During First Minister's questions, Conservative MSP Myrtle Fraser asked Mr Swinney if he regretted staying in Lord Mandelson's residence, given everything that was known at the time about the peer's relationship with the paedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein. The SNP leader replied, "The first people to complain if it had chosen to spend public money staying in a hotel rather than in the British Embassy would be the Conservative Party members of this Parliament. And just to give them all total, complete information, when I went to Lusaka in Zambia, and when I went to Lungomwe in Malawi, I stayed at the British High Commissioner's residence to make sure I was being careful and prudent with the public purse, as the people understand me to do." Lord Mandelson was sacked from his Washington role just days after Mr Swinney's visit, following the emergence of a 2003 birthday book, in which the diplomat described the paedophile as his best pal. The peers' association with Epstein continued beyond the billionaire's 2008 conviction for soliciting a minor. Last week, in the latest tranche of documents released by the US Department of Justice, it emerged Lord Mandelson kept Epstein informed of developments in the immediate aftermath of the 2010 general election, as Gordon Brown made a doomed attempt to form a coalition government, and even tipped his friend off about the then Prime Minister's resignation. The emails also suggest Lord Mandelson gave Epstein advance notice of an impending EU bailout, sent him internal government information about the state of the UK economy, and lobbied the Treasury on banking policy at Epstein's suggestion. At First Minister's questions, Mr Swinney said he was appalled by the revelations that Lord Mandelson shared information at the height of the financial crisis with Epstein. He was doing that as a serving government minister, and that somehow was overlooked when he became Keir Starmer's nominee to be the United Kingdom's ambassador to the United States. At the time of the financial crash, I was taking decisions as finance minister to make sure that investment in housing could be sustained when private investment had stopped. These were direct financial decisions which were affecting the livelihoods of people in Scotland. I am appalled that we were being undermined at the same time. He confirmed he had asked the Scottish Government's most senior civil servant to explore whether there was any risk undertaken to the strength of the decision-making in the Scottish Government. He added, I have also asked for that in relation to the engagement I had with the United Kingdom ambassador to the United States last year when I was acting to protect the Scotch whisky industry. It is an absolutely atrocious set of circumstances and an appalling judgment by the Prime Minister. It is dreadful that Scotland and the United Kingdom have been exposed to such weakness as a consequence of the poor decision-making of the Prime Minister. That article was written by Andrew Learmonth and read by E. McKenna.
The Herald on the 6th of February and the news section. 36 children suffer toxin poisoning symptoms linked to baby formula by Joshua Searle. There have been 36 clinical reports of children suffering symptoms consistent with toxin poisoning linked to a recent baby formula recalls, the UK Health Security Agency has said. The UK Health Security Agency, UKHSA, said it and partner agencies have received 24 notifications in England, 7 in Scotland and 3 in Wales, 1 in Northern Ireland and 1 from the Crown dependencies of children who had consumed implicated batches developing symptoms consistent with cereulide toxin poisoning. On January 5, the Food Standards Agency confirmed that Nestlé was undertaking a precautionary product recall of several batches of 12 SMA infant formula and follow-on formula products in the UK due to the possible presence of the cereulide toxin. The recall was updated with new product expiry dates on January 9. On January 24, Danone, another infant formula retailer, recalled one batch of Aptamil first infant formula with a best before date of October 2026 because of cereulide contamination. As reported by the BBC, a further 14 batches of Aptamil and Cow and Gate first infant milk were recalled on February 6. The toxin can cause nausea, vomiting and abdominal cramps and is unsafe to consume. It is produced by some strains of Bacillus cereus and is highly heat stable, meaning it is unlikely to be destroyed by cooking or when making the infant milk. Jane Rawling, head of incidents at the FSA, said, FSA's advice is that parents, guardians and caregivers should not feed infants or young children with these products. Cereulide is a toxin produced by food poisoning bacteria Bacillus cereus and can cause food poisoning symptoms which can be quick to develop and include vomiting and stomach cramps. I want to reassure parents, guardians and caregivers we are taking urgent action helping to ensure all of the affected product is removed from sale as a precaution. If you still have fed this product to a baby and have any concerns about potential health impact, you should seek advice from healthcare professionals by contacting your GP or calling NHS 111. These are the Nestlé projects being recalled: SMA First Instant Milk, SMA Advanced First Instant Milk, SMA Advanced Follow-On Milk, SMA Anti-Reflux, SMA Alfamino, SMA First Infant Milk, SMA Little Steps First Instant Milk, SMA Comfort, and SMA Lactose Free. In a statement, Nestlé said, following the detection of a quality issue with an ingredient provided by our leading supplier, Nestlé has undertaken testing of all arachidonic acid (ARA) oil and corresponding oil mixes used in the production of potentially impacted infant nutrition products. No illnesses have been confirmed in connection with the products involved to date. The company is in contact with UK authorities and, as a precautionary measure, is voluntarily recalling specific batches of its SMA infant formula and follow-on formula. Nestlé assures parents and caregivers that it is implementing appropriate actions to safeguard the health and well-being of families and their babies. At the same time, the company is working to minimise any potential supply disruption. Nestlé remains committed to keeping parents, caregivers and the public informed and to providing clear, transparent information and support throughout this process. A Danone spokesman added it was sold in May to July 2025. The expiry date, batch and time can be found on the lower back of the pack. No other batches are affected by this notice. Customers who still have products from this batch can return it to the shop where they bought it for a full refund with or without receipt. That was by Joshua Searle. The Herald on the 6th of February and the news section. George from Peppa Pig to be diagnosed as moderately deaf by Carlo Simone. George Pig is set to be diagnosed as moderately deaf in an upcoming episode of Peppa Pig. The storyline will see the character filled with a hearing aid in a storyline developed with the National Deaf Children's Society. Jodie Onsley, who is known as Fury in BBC Gladiators, will voice George's audiologist in the episode. The 25-year-old athlete, who was born deaf and has a cochlear implant as a toddler, said she was so grateful to be part of the storyline. Onsley said that when her character revealed George's hearing loss, she felt like she was speaking to her parents, and shared, "I was so young, so I wasn't aware of this experience, only through what my mum and dad have told me. I don't think I realised how emotional it felt for them in that moment in time. It was quite bizarre to be in that position. But even more so, I think it's why I put more heart into it, because it felt quite real. Hopefully that comes across in the episode to the parents and the kids watching it." The history of Peppa Pig and how long it's been running for. Peppa Pig first aired in 2004 and has become a global phenomenon, broadcast in over 180 territories and in over 40 languages. The show focuses on the life of Peppa, the parents, Daddy Pig and Mummy Pig, her little brother George, and her baby sister Evie, who was born last May. The new hearing loss storyline was developed in collaboration with the National Deaf Children's Society and will air on Milkshake from March 9. Peppa Pig was co-created by Neville Ostley and Mark Baker of the animation studio Ashley Baker Davies. The brand has since inspired theme parks in the UK and abroad and has featured on collectible Royal Mail stamps. In 2019, the show was acquired by toy company Hasbro following its purchase of Entertainment One's portfolio, and that was by Carlo Simone. The Herald on the 6th of February and the news section. What latest Scottish poll shows about reform and unionists by Andrew Learmonth. Reform UK is now just 5 points behind the SNP in the Scottish Parliament's regional vote, according to a dramatic new poll. The More in Common survey suggests that the constitutional divide remains central to Scotland's politics, while the nationalist vote largely unified behind the SNP, while opposition to independence is now fractured across four parties. The data shows Reform is now the most popular party amongst unionists, taking 31% of those opposed to independence, ahead of Labour on 23%. Despite its fall in support since the last Scottish Parliament election, the SNP remains well ahead in the constituency vote and is still poised to emerge as the largest party at Holyrood. In a constituency contest, the SNP stands on 35%, a fall of 13 points since 2021, but still enough to give it a commanding 16-point lead over Reform UK on 19%. Labour follows close behind on 18%, down 4 points, while the Conservatives have slumped to 11%, an 11-point drop. The Liberal Democrats are on 10%, up 3 points, with the Greens on 5%. On the regional vote, the SNP is on 25% and Reform on 20%. Labour sits on 19%, the Liberal Democrats on 13%, the Conservatives on 12% and the Greens on 9%. According to analysis by Professor Sir John Curtis, that would give the SNP 59 seats, Reform and Labour 19, the Lib Dems 13, the Tories 11, and the Greens 8. The polling guru said that if the Greens only fought a dozen constituency seats, that would push the SNP up to 61 and see Labour and Reform down 1. Prof Curtis said that the 25% for the SNP on the list vote was unusually low, but makes no difference to the seat projection as all the anticipated SNP seats are constituency ones anyway. More in Common said the polling suggests that the independence debate could play a decisive role in handing victory to the SNP, despite their decline in support, with the nationalist vote united behind the party, while the anti-independence vote is split across 4 parties. The polling of 1,017 Scottish adults was carried out between January 24 and February 4, 2026. That was by Andrew Learmonth. The Herald on the 6th of February and the news section. What Scottish budget means for hospitals and ambulances by Andrew Learmonth. The Scottish Government will need to rely on heroic improvements in efficiency or significant reductions in patient demand to stop services in the NHS deteriorating, the Institute for Fiscal Studies has warned. In its analysis for last month's Scottish budget, the think tank says ministers could be forced to cut other areas of public spending to prop up hospital and ambulance performance. The Stage 1 debate on the Scottish Government's tax and spending plans will take place next Thursday, but with Labour set to abstain, there's no danger of it failing to pass. When Finance Secretary Shona Robinson delivered the budget to Parliament in January, she told MSPs it was a budget focused on delivery and on hope, on a stronger NHS and on a brighter future for Scotland and the people who live here. In its analysis, the think tank says the plans actually imply a substantial reduction in the share of health funding going to hospitals and ambulance services, while the overall health and social care budget for day-to-day spending is set to rise by 0.2% in real terms in 2026 to 27. Once planned transfers to councils to help fund pay for social care are factored in, the remaining budget is set to fall by 0.6% in real terms. While the health budget is due to return to a stronger growth in the 2 years after that, increasing by an average of 2.4% a year in real terms, the IFS says there are questions over how that funding is distributed. Budgets for the NHS territorial and national health boards, which fund hospitals and ambulance services, are set to grow by just 0.4% a year between 2027 to 28 and 2028 to 29. By contrast, the remainder of the health and social care budget, covering areas such as primary care and social care, is projected to rise by almost 12% a year. The report notes that no detailed breakdown has been provided on how that money would be allocated, but says the plans nonetheless amount to a major shift in spending from hospitals to community-based services. Underpinning the plans are efficiency targets requiring NHS boards to deliver savings of 3% a year, far in excess of historical trends. The IFS said without heroic improvements in efficiency or significant reductions in patient demand, NHS board budgets will need substantial top-ups to avoid deterioration in performance. This could stymie efforts to shift funding to community health and social care, or necessitate even steeper cuts to areas such as local government and justice funding. The report states that capital budgets for health and social care and for finance and local government are set to fall next year by 10% and 9% respectively in real terms. However, overall investment spending is set to rise by about 3% in real terms in 2026 to 27, driven largely by a 24% real terms increase in the Justice and Home Affairs budget as work continues on new prisons. From 2027 to 28 onwards, the pattern changes significantly as the construction of HMP Highland and HMP Glasgow winds down. Investment spending within the Justice portfolio is set to fall by an average of 31% a year. The IFS says this will free up capital funding for other priorities, with investment outside Justice projected to increase by around 1% in real terms over the same period. Housing emerges as a clear winner, with the capital investment set to rise by 23% in real terms between 2026 to 27 and 2029 to 30, while transport investment is forecast to increase by 3% over the same period. Even so, planned capital investment in health and social care is set to fall by an average of 2% a year in real terms. The IFS warns this could undermine efforts to improve productivity, as investment in facilities, equipment and technology is often needed to deliver efficiency gains. Meanwhile, the think tank says the Scottish Government's suggested 3% rise in council tax is unlikely to be sufficient to meet rising demands and costs. To match funding growth in England, councils would need to increase it by 6.5% next year, with steeper rises likely later. Although funding from Scottish Government is rising, most of it is earmarked for wages and social care and childcare, leaving only a very small increase in discretionary budgets for services such as libraries and road maintenance. The finance and local government portfolio faces real-term cuts, averaging 2.1% a year from 2027 to 28. If half of the future healthcare growth is transferred to councils, those cuts could shrink to 0.5%. The council tax would still need to rise 8% a year, or 14% if the transfers fall. Martin Brogard, a research economist at the IFS and co-author of the report, said the Scottish Government faced tricky trade-offs across both day-to-day and capital spending. For day-to-day spending, it is banking on big improvements in hospital and ambulance service productivity and a shift in resources to some combination of primary and social care to refocus on preventing ill health, enable health funding to stretch further, and avoid a deterioration in service quality. Even then, many other areas, such as local government and justice, will see cuts in their funding from 2027 to 28. For investment, the trade-offs will be eased somewhat by the winding up of the prison's construction programme. The Scottish Government is understandably exploring how private capital can help it deliver public investments more quickly, but it should avoid locking itself or councils in too many potentially costly long-term commitments. Sandy Begbie, Chief Executive of Scottish Financial Enterprise, said, "The IFS analysis highlights the challenges that exist in the public finances, as well as the long-term problems the next government will face. Against this backdrop, it's vital to focus on tackling public sector inefficiency and increasing underlying tax bases, which can generate revenue without increasing tax rates. The only way to do that is by delivering sustainable and significant economic growth." Scottish Conservative Shadow Finance Secretary Craig Hoy, MSP, said, "This damning analysis confirms the SNP are set to shamefully shortchange frontline healthcare services. The Scottish Government has been approached for comment." And that was by Andrew Learmonth. The Herald on 6th of February and the news section, "Your Party to Hold Conference in Scotland this weekend," by Hannah Brown. Your party will hold its founding Scottish conference this weekend, with former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn expected to attend as members decide the party's stance on independence and whether to contest this year's Holyrood elections. Hundreds of members are expected to gather at Dundee's Bonner Hall for what organisers describe as a landmark moment in establishing a formal Scottish branch of the left-wing party. The conference is expected to feature speeches from high-profile figures, including former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, MP Zara Sultana, Your Party Glasgow councillor Dan Hutchison, an Irish Teacher Dalla, Paul Murphy, of People Before Profit Solidarity. Representatives from socialist organisations in Germany, Serbia and Spain are also due to attend. Members will debate a series of founding documents that will determine the party's structure in Scotland, its relationship with the wider party in England and Wales, and its official stance on Scottish independence. Delegates will also discuss strategy for May's Scottish Parliament elections. If members vote to stand candidates, the party has indicated the selection process and policy development could begin within days of the conference concluding. Discussions about working with other left-wing parties will also be discussed. The gathering comes at a tumultuous time for the fledgling party after disagreements over leadership, electoral strategy and organisational structure arose last year. However, organisers say the conference will emphasise member-led decision-making and grassroots participation. Organising group member Ellie Gomersall, who defected from the Scottish Greens to your party last year, said, "The political establishment has left people across Scotland down time after time. It couldn't be clearer that a new movement, built from the ground up by ordinary people, is desperately needed." That's exactly what we're doing this weekend. This is a member-led party, and it'll be members from all across Scotland who'll be collectively making key decisions in Dundee, from our approach to Scottish independence to our own organisational setup and our approach to this year's Holyrood elections. No one said founding a new party from scratch would be easy, but with a genocidal right-wing Labour government in power in Westminster and a stale SNP government running out of ideas in Holyrood, the need for your party in Scotland is clear, and this conference is just the start. That was by Hannah Brown.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 9th of February 2026, from the news section, Aberfeldy murder trial, tape put over doorbell camera. Report by Grant McCabe. A murder suspect was seen covering his doorbell camera with tape on the day he allegedly shot a man to death. Jurors were also told the CCTV hard drive at the home of David Campbell, shared with his wife, also appeared to have gone off that morning. Former head gamekeeper Campbell is on trial, charged with murdering Brian Lowe, 65, at the Leafy Lane near to the Pittlee track close to Aberfeldy, Perth and Kinross on February 16th, 2024. The 77-year-old denies the accusation and has lodged a special defence of alibi. The High Court in Glasgow was today/yesterday a compilation of video footage as part of the Operation Newley murder inquiry. DC David Gardiner was the officer in charge of putting it together. This included a series of clips from the day of the shooting. Among them was Campbell leaving his Tynacaroan home in Aberfeldy early that morning before returning shortly after. Around 7:35 a.m, DC Gardner said he then assessed Campbell appearing to cover the Ring doorbell camera to his home with what appears to be duct tape. Other footage minutes later showed him looking up towards the CCTV camera at the property. Prosecutor Greg Farrell asked the officer, "From your understanding, is there any CCTV footage captured there after 10:09 that morning?" DC Gardner: "Not from the CCTV hard drive." Mr. Farrell: "The CCTV hard drive seemed to have gone off at 10:09 a.m. on February 16th. The detective: "Yes." The murder charge includes a claim that Campbell had disabled CCTV cameras at his home to conceal his whereabouts. The Ring doorbell camera appeared to be uncovered later that morning, but at 11:10 a.m, after Campbell returned home having been out with another man, a piece of duct tape is again placed over the lens. The court was told there was no more footage recorded from the doorbell camera until around 7:30 p.m. that evening. Jurors also watched clips of a cyclist in the Aberfeldy area that day. The individual is captured at 4:12 p.m. in what DC Gardner described as a couple of streets away from Campbell's home. A close-up still of the rider and the bike at that time was shown today/yesterday. Jurors had previously in the trial viewed an image of a cycle said to belong to Campbell's wife Elizabeth while it was outside a food bank in Aberfeldy in November 2023. Asked by Mr. Farrell did he see any similarities, DC Gardner stated there was the type of the light tar trim, the mud flaps and a parcel shelf. Cameras were said to have lost sight of the cyclist between 4:18 p.m. and 5:01 p.m. Mr. Farrell went on to put to DC Gardner that the court had already heard that there was no movement data recorded on Mr. Lowe's phone from 4:52 p.m. that day. The cyclist, meantime, was seen again on camera that evening. DC Gardner claimed at one stage that the individual was heading in the direction of Campbell's home. The officer assessed that Campbell was recorded on the Ring doorbell at 7:32 p.m. at his property. He was said to be wearing a boiler suit that he had on earlier that day. Mr. Lowe's body was discovered in the morning of February 17 next to the rural path, with his black Labrador Millie close by. He had suffered gunshot wounds to his neck and chest. The trial before Lord Scott continues. That report was written by Grant McCabe and read by Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 9th of February 2026, from the Politics section. Anna Sarwar calls for Starmer to quit as Prime Minister, by political correspondent Kathleen Nutt. A furious Anna Sarwar has today called for Keir Starmer to quit as Prime Minister. The Scottish Labour leader made the intervention in a press conference in Glasgow this afternoon as he attacked the failures in Downing Street in the wake of revelations surrounding Peter Mandelson's links to Jeffrey Epstein and fears over damage the scandal may do to his party's chances at the Holyrood elections in May. He told reporters his first priority is to Scotland and that he did not want to sacrifice the country to a third decade of an SNP government. That's why the distraction needs to end and the leadership in Downing Street has to change. It is so obvious that we desperately need change in Scotland, and in 3 months' time the opportunity to get rid of a failing SNP government is one that is too important to be missed. We cannot allow the failures at the heart of Downing Street to mean the failures continue here in Scotland, because the election in May is not without consequence for the lives of Scots. Mr. Sarwar is the most senior Labour politician to call for Sir Keir to go, conscious of the uphill struggle facing Scottish Labour in May's Holyrood elections. Responding to Mr. Sarwar's call for the Prime Minister to step down, a Downing Street spokesman said, Keir Starmer is one of only 4 Labour leaders to ever have won a general election. He has a clear 5-year mandate from the British people to deliver change, and that is what he will do. The Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, and Communications Chief Tim Allen have already quit in the wake of the Lord Peter Mandelson scandal. Documents released by the UK government last week appeared to show Lord Mandelson sending sensitive financial government information to Epstein while the peer was a minister in Gordon Brown's Labour government. Mandelson, who has denied criminality, is now at the centre of a police investigation into alleged public misconduct. Downing Street insisted on Monday that Sir Keir would not resign and was concentrating on the job in hand. Before news of Mr. Sarwar's intervention, the Prime Minister was said to be upbeat and confident as he gave an address to Number 10 staff amid the fallout over the Mandelson affair. Sir Keir is due to face Labour MPs later on Monday, amid anger over his appointment of Lord Mandelson as ambassador to the US, despite knowing that the peer's links with Jeffrey Epstein continued after the financier's conviction for child sex offences. Labour has 37 MPs in Scotland who will now face having to decide whether to back Mr. Sarwar or stay loyal to Sir Keir. Asked if Sir Keir was going to resign today, the Prime Minister's official spokesman said, "No." He added, "The Prime Minister is concentrating on the job in hand. He is getting on with the job of delivering change across the country." Pressed about reports going into the weekend that Sir Keir had been remorseful and wavering over his political future, he said, "That is not the Prime Minister who appeared in front of staff this morning. It is very clear that he remains determined to tackle the job in hand." The Prime Minister is confident he has the unanimous support of the Cabinet, the spokesman said. Sir Keir told staff at Downing Street on Monday morning that they must go forward from here and prove that politics can be a force for good. That address, in which the Prime Minister paid tribute to Mr. McSweeney as a colleague and a friend, came before Mr. Allen's resignation was announced. Speaking to his team about Lord Mandelson, Sir Keir said, "The thing that makes me most angry is the undermining of the belief that politics can be a force for good and can change lives. Downing Street Communications Chief Mr Allen said he was standing down to allow a new number 10 team to be built. Mr Allen, who like Lord Manderson is a New Labour veteran, only joined the media operation in September. Work and Pensions Secretary Pat McFadden said Keir Starmer deserves support from backbenchers before he's addressed to them at a meeting of the Parliamentary Labour Party, PLP, on Monday evening. He told the Press Association, "I think he will acknowledge what's gone wrong. He'll take responsibility for the decision, but he'll say the government still has a lot of important work to do, and he wants to lead that work, and I believe he deserves the support of the Parliamentary Party in doing that." Several Labour MPs on the left of the party, including Brian Leishman, Ian Byrne and Kim Johnson, suggested Sir Keir should consider following Mr McSweeney out the door. Two unnamed cabinet ministers were quoted by the Times as saying Sir Keir was weaker and could stand down at any moment, a claim Number 10 said was categorically untrue. The pressure on his premiership looks unlikely to ease as the government prepares for the lengthy process of releasing tens of thousands of emails, messages and documents relating to Lord Manderson's appointment. Sir Keir believes the files will prove the former Labour grantee lied about the extent of his ties to the notorious paedophile during his vetting. He and Mr McSweeney have pinned blame on vetting by the security services for failing to disprove Lord Manderson's claims that he barely knew the late financier, which were later dramatically debunked by disclosures in the so-called Epstein files. Officials have been tasked with examining that process as a priority. Moments ahead of Mr Sarwar's press conference, Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy was the first of the Cabinet to post his support on social media, saying, "Sir Keir Starmer won a massive mandate 18 months ago for 5 years to deliver on Labour's manifesto that we all stood on. We should let nothing distract us from our mission to change Britain, and we support the Prime Minister in doing that." Other Cabinet Ministers rallied to support Sir Keir. Chancellor Rachel Reeves said, "With Keir as our Prime Minister, we are turning the country around." Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper said, "At this crucial time for the world, we need his leadership not just at home but on the global stage." That article was written by political correspondent Kathleen Nutt. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 9th of February 2026, from the news section. Great Glen Way hiking trail section to move off-road. Report by Jodie Harrison. A major section of a famous Scottish hiking trail is to be moved off-road as part of a significant improvement project aimed at boosting safety and enhancing the experience for walkers. The Highland Council has begun work on removing more than 3 kilometres of the Great Glen Way from a public road near Grotag, south of Drumnadrochit. The existing on-road stretch has long been criticised by users as uncomfortable and, at times, unsafe due to traffic levels. The Great Glen Way stretches 118 kilometres, 79 miles, from Fort William to Inverness and is managed and maintained by a dedicated team of officers and rangers from the Highland Council. Recent surveys indicate that users of the route contribute more than £3 million each year to local businesses, while it also remains popular with local residents. Working in partnership with Bunloit estate managers and conservation charity Highland Rewilding, the council has developed a new off-road alternative that will guide walkers through woodland and restored habitats on the estate. Councillor Ken Gowans, chair of the council's Economy and Infrastructure Committee, said the project marked a significant step forward for one of the Highlands' best-known trails. This project represents a major step forward in improving safety and enhancing the experience for everyone who enjoys the Great Glen Way, he said. By moving this busy section off-road, we are creating a more accessible and enjoyable route, while working closely with partners to protect and celebrate the area's outstanding natural environment. Preparatory work began in winter 2024 and included surveys, negotiations, and engagement with landowners in the local community. Planning consent was granted last year, and £150,000 has been secured through a joint project fund involving Forestry and Land Scotland and Scottish Canals. Bunloit Estate, which is managed by Highlands Rewilding, has supported the project throughout. The new route will allow visitors to experience the estate's natural woodland and diverse habitats, with interpretation panels expected to be installed at a later stage. Alex Davies, Bunloit Estate Manager from Highlands Rewilding, said, "We are delighted to welcome walkers on this new route through Bunloit Estate. Taking the Great Glenway off-road will undoubtedly make the area safer for everyone, while opening up some beautiful views and guiding people through the mosaic of wildlife habitats we are restoring in Bunloit. Providing opportunities for access to local nature and all the benefits it brings is a priority for us at Nature's Rewilding, and it has been a pleasure to work with the Highland Council Countryside Rangers and Access Officers to achieve this." Construction is being delivered by High Track Limited, a specialist upland path building contractor, with the project scheduled for completion by the end of next month. That report was written by Jody Harrison and read by E. McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Monday 9th of February, Politics. No decision on grooming gang probe for at least 18 months. By political editor Andrew Learmonth. The SNP has been accused of dragging its feet on tackling grooming gangs after Watchdogs set out an 18-month timetable for a national review that would only then inform a decision on whether a full public inquiry is required. Critics say the timescale amounted to a further delay for survivors of group-based child sexual exploitation. The Scottish Government announced a national review in December, insisting it would not be bounced into establishing a grooming gangs inquiry without a clear evidence base. Education Secretary General Gilruth told MSPs at the time that, while ministers had not ruled out a full inquiry, decisions had to be grounded in evidence rather than momentum or rhetoric. The Scottish Government announced the review following controversy over Justice Secretary Angela Constance's misrepresentation of the views of Professor Alexis Jay. Labour MP Joanne Reid said the announcement showed the Scottish Government was failing victims. Scotland's most vulnerable are crying out for a government that will stand up for them against the abusers and exploiters, but today's announcement shows that it won't come from the SNP, she said. Instead of a swift investigation into the scale of child sexual abuse and exploitation in Scotland, we are to get 18 months and more of bureaucratic paper shuffling, followed by a decision, at some unspecified date afterwards, on whether there will be a full inquiry. What Louise Casey was able to do in weeks, it seems Scotland's self-important self-regulators will take over a year to do, because to go any faster would cause severe political embarrassment to John Swinney and his useless ministers. John Swinney has no moral courage. The regulators seemingly have no conscience. This is Scotland's shame and it needs to end. Scottish Government Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Justice, Liam Kerr, said the wait for a decision was completely unacceptable for victims. This lengthy wait for a decision is completely unacceptable for Scottish victims of grooming gangs, he said. If the SNP are serious about tackling child exploitation in fuel, then they must stop hiding behind reviews and commit to a full, independent inquiry now. John Swinney is set to up this review to kick the can down the road, and the question he has to answer is, why? His Justice Secretary lied to Parliament to make the case against a grooming gangs inquiry, and now the review he is setting up is allowing him to stall for time again. Victims want and deserve answers now. The First Minister is betraying them by standing in the way of an inquiry being established. The review has been carried out by the Care Inspectorate and His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary in Scotland, working alongside Healthcare Improvement Scotland and His Majesty's Inspectorate of Education in Scotland. On Monday, the Chief Inspectors and Chief Executives of the four bodies meet Chief Officers groups from across Scotland to set out the full scope of the review. Representatives from Police Scotland were also present. The work will be divided into 3 phases: assessment, assurance and improvement, with the first phase expected to last 6 months and report in summer 2026. Phases 2 and 3 will then follow, with the full process across the first 2 phases taking up to 18 months. As part of Phase 1, public protection partners will be asked to provide evidence of their understanding of the scale and nature of group-based child sexual abuse and exploitation, as well as the steps they are taking to prevent, identify and respond to such harm. The inspection team will assess local government's arrangements, guidance and processes, and examine how effectively agencies are working together, including on threat assessment, intelligence gathering and information sharing. Later phases will look at survivor protection, advocacy and support, the quality of investigations, and how effectively cases are disrupted and prosecuted. Jackie Irvin, Chief Executive of the Care Inspectorate, said the review was intended to establish a clear picture of how Scotland's systems were operating. Child sexual abuse and exploitation and child criminal exploitation are significant harms that have a devastating impact on survivors, their families and carers, and wider Scottish society, she said. Our meeting today, with a broad range of public protection representatives, set out the full scope of the National Review. We will report the joint findings and conclusions at the end of each phase, with the first one culminating in the summer. Craig Naylor, His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Constabulary in Scotland, said the evidence gathered would feed directly into ministerial decisions. This national review will gather evidence which will support Scottish Government ministers' considerations of whether there should be a future public inquiry into group-based child sexual abuse and exploitation, he said. An update on the review will also be provided to Holyrood's Education, Children and Young People Committee later this month. That report was written by Andrew Learmonth and read by Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 9th of February 2026, from the news section. Staff at University of Strathclyde back strike action over cuts. Report by Josh Pizzuto-Pomako. Staff at Strathclyde University have backed industrial action amid plans to cut 76 jobs at the leading institution. 80% of University and College Union, UCU, members at the university voted to back strike action on a turnout of 58%. 87% also said they would be willing to take part in action short of strike, which can include refusing to undertake voluntary activities, cover for absent colleagues, or mark exam papers. Jen Remnant, Strathclyde UCU branch chair, said, "This vote is a clear indication that staff at Strathclyde are determined to protect the university, fight for every job, and ensure that no one leaves through compulsory redundancy. We are clear that the threat of compulsory redundancies needs to be taken off the table, and staff deserve transparency and respect. The university should evidence its people-orientated values and support employees to have a full say in the future of their jobs and the future of direction of the university more broadly, to the benefit of all staff and students." At the end of January, the Herald reported that more than 60 members of staff had been invited to take part in meetings where they were told that their jobs were at risk. One member of staff said that their department had been traumatised by the reshaping process. And yesterday, it was reported that the university is facing questions over whether it failed to follow its own governance rules, with fears the institution's court has been sidelined as management pushes ahead with job cuts. Joe Grady, UCU General Secretary, added, "Strathclyde University is integral to higher education in Glasgow and Scotland. Losing staff from the university right now at a time when workloads are already unmanageable can't be done without damaging the student experience and the university's reputation. Members at Strathclyde have shown their determination to protect jobs. It is time now that senior managers listen to the university staff and finally rule out the use of compulsory redundancies." Strathclyde University has been approached for comment. In November and December, University Principal Professor Stephen MacArthur outlined his cost-cutting plans in a series of messages to staff. He wrote, "The university needs to make £20 million of recurrent savings in this year and a further £15 million next year. As a result of this reshaping, we anticipate that around 76 existing full-time equivalent posts will not be part of the future structure. We will work with our staff and trade unions to mitigate the impact of proposed changes on affected staff." That report was written by Josh Puzzuko-Pomako and read by Ian McKenna.
From the Herald, Monday, 9th of February 2026, Sports section. Glasgow City left frustrated after Celtic salvaged draw. By Alison McConnell. Glasgow City were the more frustrated of the teams at Petershill after Celtic came back to earn a 1-1 draw. A calamitous error from Hoops goalkeeper Lisa Rogers had allowed Nicole Koslova to open the scoring just after the hour mark. Morgan Cross levelled it for Celtic, with City goalkeeper Lee Gibson then denying Maria McEnemy in the closing stages with a fantastic save from a free kick. "We would have been gutted to lose it," says City's Amy Muir. "We created a lot, but we just didn't have that quality in the final third. We know the stage of the season we're going into now, and we know how vital every point can be. So we will be up there. It's a bit of a frustration at the moment." It means City's gap at the top is cut to 3 points. Hearts' emphatic win over Aberdeen means Eva Ollitt's side are in second spot, with Celtic and Rangers both 5 points behind the league leaders with 1 game to go before the split. James and Alan Forrest were both in attendance at Petershill to watch Sister Lisa in action for City. She was at the centre of the action almost immediately when she felt she was barged in the box by Claire Walsh. It was one of 2 penalty calls for the Petershill side closing the opening half with an appeal for a spot kick later in the game, when Emily Whelan felt she had again been bundled over by Tara O'Hanlon. In between times, City were the more menacing of the 2 teams as they posed questions of the Celtic defence without finding a way through. Natalia Robel picked out Whelan in acres of space, with the midfielder aiming her effort wildly over the bar. Robel was denied by a block from Tara O'Hanlon, while the rebounded Forrest shot from the edge of the box was met by resistance from the Hoops defence. Celtic were forced to rejig things when Emma Lawton was forced off after coming second best in a 50-50 challenge with Forrest. Both players were committed to going for the ball, but Forrest earned a booking for the tackle. The change meant a debut for Maddie Wilde as Celtic changed things around. Celtic's only real chance in the first 45 minutes came when Morgan Cross picked out Poppy Pritchard, but she blasted the shot well over the bar. City got the goal their play merited after the hour mark, but it was a howler from Rogers. Forrest whipped the ball out to Whelan on the flank, who turned O'Hanlon before taking aim. The shot was straight to Rogers, but she spilled it, with Kozlova beating Kelly Clark to bundle the ball home from close range. Celtic had a response in them. McEnany sent in an inviting ball, with Cross getting in front of Amy Muir to get on the end of it and beat Lee Gibson. Tails up, Celtic battered the crossbar, when Wilde got on the end of Amy Gallagher's free kick, with Clark's rebound effort blocked by the City defence. Gibson punched away an arching McEnany free kick on the cusp of the 90th minute mark. A draw was probably a fair reflection of the game, said Celtic captain Kelly Clark. I think we weren't in it in the first half, but after the break we got ourselves back into the game. The goal is a mistake, but it happens. It's all about how you react to it. Elsewhere, Rangers battered Hamilton Accies 11-0, with Leanne Crichton's side heading into the break 8 goals to the good. Laura Berry netted a hat-trick. Katie Wilkinson claimed 2, as did Mia McCauley, and May Croft, Lee Menwing and Sophie Black and Khalees Brookshire all chipped in with the goals in a devastating display. The victory is one thing, said Crichton. Between now and the end of the season, it's all about getting 3 points in every game and seeing how we can amass between now and then. But the performance aspect was the most pleasing. We gave Hamilton Accies the respect they deserved, and it was a professional performance for us. We knew how important it would be to get a fast start, and some of the football in that opening 45 minutes is the best we've played this season. Hibs beat Motherwell 2-0, while Partick Thistle's 2-1 win over Montrose means they could still leapfrog Montrose with one game to go before the split to land at top 6 place. That article was by Alison McConnell. From the Herald, Saturday, 7th February 2026. Sports section. Gregor Townsend dismisses exit talk after Scotland defeat, by Anthony Brown, PA, News Agency. Under fire head coach Gregor Townsend dismissed any notion that he would step down after Scotland suffered a disastrous Guinness Six Nations start by losing 8-15 to Italy in rain-lashed Rome. This setback in the Eternal City, which all but ends the Scots' hopes of contending for the championship after matchday 1, sparked renewed calls for the long-serving 52-year-old to quit or be sacked. Townsend's position was already under intense scrutiny after a poor autumn campaign and following his contentious decision to take on a part-time consultancy role with Red Bull. This has led to a report emerging in recent days that he had agreed to join Newcastle upon expiry of his Scotland contract following the World Cup next year. However, he said in his post-match press conference in Stadio Olimpico that his focus was on preparing the team for next Saturday's Calcutta Cup showdown with England at Murrayfield. Asked if he still had the appetite to soldier on, Townsend said, "Absolutely, we've got a game in 7 days' time. We've got a game to review, a selection to be put together, and how we improve today is all we're thinking about as a coaching group. It's very tough when you lose, but when you've got a game around the corner, your focus has to be on that. How do we make sure we put on a training session and have a team that goes out there and gives our supporters a victory? That's all we're motivated by." Asked to clarify if he's still expected to be in charge for the clash with England, Townsend said, "Well, I want to be. That's my job. So yeah, that's what I'll be focused on." Townsend flatly denied the speculation that he was set to take charge of Newcastle next year, which formed a big part of the narrative in the days leading up to the championship opener, had any bearing on his side's performance in Rome. The fired-up Azzurri raced into a 12-point lead within 14 minutes through tries from Louis Lina and Tommaso Melancello. The Scots kept themselves in contention with scores by Jack Dempsey and replacement George Horne, but they were generally unable to get their attack firing, while their set-piece continually malfunctioned as Italy held firm for a deserved victory on a sodden surface. Townsend said, 100% acknowledged that there would be a backlash to a result that sees Italy leapfrog Scotland in the world rankings. We saw our supporters on the way to the game today. They mean a huge amount to us, and we're really disappointed for them, and we didn't find a way to win, said Townsend. We know our fans are right to be disappointed, and we didn't get the win. Captain Sion Tepulutu added, "It's a setback, definitely. If you lose a game in this competition, it's hard to come back and win it. Teams have done it before, but to talk about winning the competition is not something I want to get up here and do at the moment. I'm really frustrated that we've come here and lost the game. I thought we were really well prepared, but ultimately we just didn't execute it out there in these dreadful conditions." That article was by Anthony Brown. From the Herald, Monday, 9th of February 2026, Sports section. The rule that could see huge Celtic crowd at Rangers tie, by Ewan Payton, sports writer. Celtic could be granted a huge away crowd for the upcoming Scottish Cup tie against Rangers. That is, if Police Scotland and other relevant authorities pass the request. Rangers were drawn at home to their arch Glasgow rivals in the quarter-finals of the tournament last night, following Falkirk's win over Stenhousemuir. The game will be played on the weekend of March the 7th to 8th at Ibrox, just 1 week after a Scottish Premiership meeting between the two sides at the same venue. For just under a year now, the Glasgow Giants came to agreement which saw each side allocated just over 2,000 tickets for their respective away games on league business. However, unlike in the SPFL, Scottish Cup rules dictated by the SFA highlight that a much larger allocation can be requested by visiting clubs. The rule states that an away team can gain a maximum ticket allocation of 20% of the stadium's capacity. That would result in Celtic being handed 10,000 tickets for the Cup quarter-final, which would essentially see the Hoops being given the full of the Broomloan Road stand. Both clubs would need to come to an agreement on the matter, along with the SFA and the police, for the request to stand. Martin O'Neill's side defeated Dundee in extra time to progress to the last 8 of the competition. Meanwhile, Rangers thumped Queen's Park. That article was by Ewan Payton.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 9th of February 2026, from the opinion section. In the West End stillness, I found Scotland's greatest light, kindness. Article written by Ian Houston. A quiet encounter in Glasgow's cloisters becomes a reminder of the everyday kindness that runs through Scotland, says Ian Houston. I was recently walking alone one Sunday night in the West End of Glasgow. The evening before, I had been in the iconic Bute Hall at the University of Glasgow for a joyous Burns supper. Guided by the darkened silhouette of the Gilbert Scott building, I returned to the cloisters, searching for a Robert Burns stained glass window I had seen only in photographs. In the winter quiet, with not another soul in sight, I paused, unsure where to look next. It was then that a kind security guard noticed me and took me under his knowledgeable wing. He called an equally friendly colleague, and together the three of us set off in search of the window. In the end, we found it. We would not have achieved that small goal without one another. Standing there, looking up at the inconspicuous glass, we spoke a little about Burns, but more about our journeys, our paths, where we had come from, and what had brought us to that moment. As I gazed upward, I noticed another nearby window, almost directly below, with the word charity elegantly inscribed across it. That word, so closely tied to kindness, became an illuminating lesson, a colourful window into Scotland itself. Like any nation, Scotland has its challenges, but to me it also has a shrine and a spirit that runs quietly yet unmistakably through moments like this. That spirit shows itself not in grand declarations, but in small human gestures. A stranger who pauses, a guide who walks beside you, a conversation that opens without agenda. That shine is a spirit of welcome, of shared dignity, of people meeting one another not as roles or ranks, but as fellow travellers. I know a reader may be tempted to inject a stroke of cynicism into the picture I paint. I understand. There was that angry traveller at the train station who told me loudly to get out of the expletive way. I actually wasn't mad with him. I can write and speak to what I experienced in Scotland. What unfolded again on this recent visit back home was unforced and unperformed, asking nothing in return. And kindness and charity did not happen just once with the stained glass story. They appeared across multiple meetings, in walks on a beach, rides in a car, supper gatherings, casual conversations in front of a fire, moving through Parliament, engaging with students, travelling on trains and subways, and sitting with a friend over hot chocolate. Again and again I encountered a generosity of spirit that made space for presence rather than performance. Taken together, these moments form a pattern too consistent to dismiss. They reveal not a polished image of a nation, but a lived ethic, charity not merely etched in stained glass, but practiced daily, quietly, kindly, freely, and offered without ceremony to those who arrive open-hearted. As Burns wrote, "That man to man, the world o'er, shall brothers be for a' that." In Scotland, it seems, those words are not merely sung or spoken, but lived, most clearly in unplanned kindnesses, gestures offered without expectation. I am proud to be Scottish. While I do not live here, it lives within me wherever I stand. I am loyal to what it has taught me, not as an abstract identity, but as a way of moving through the world, attentive, generous, and rooted in charity. As Scotland lives in me, it shapes how I move among others, pausing, walking alongside, offering kindness without needing to name it. And in that, I carry a quiet lesson from every street, every cloister, and every warm smile and hug I have been fortunate enough to receive, that the heart of Scotland, like the best of its people, lives in the simple act of giving, seeing, and being fully present. The smallest gestures can hold the brightest light. A pause, a smile, a quiet act of care. These are the moments that endure, ripple outward, and make the world a little more generous, a little more alive. Let's keep providing these illuminating lessons, Scotland. The world needs that shine. Ian Houston promotes commercial, educational, artistic and charitable linkages between Scotland, UK and the US. He is an honorary professor at the University of the West of Scotland and honorary lecturer at the University of Aberdeen. He is located in the Washington, D.C. area. His views are his own. The article was read to you by Elizabeth.
From Herald, Scotland, 5th of February 2026, from the STEM section of the business section. AILSA to address poor quality AI funding applications. Article by Christy Dorsey. A new AI platform designed to improve the process of grant applications and their composition has launched with backing from two high-profile financial executives. Scottish-based fintech entrepreneur Rab Meliani has secured support from Monzo co-founder Gary Dolman and former RBS and NatWest retail banking chief executive Benny Higgins for AILSA, a grant discovery and application tool. Combining technology with human expertise, AILSA aims to address the growing problem of poor quality as the rate of successful applications has fallen, even though widespread use of generative AI has pushed up the volume of grant submissions. The irony is that AI has made it easier than ever before to write grant applications, but much harder to submit a good one, Mr. Meliani said. The challenge for businesses isn't writing, it's understanding which opportunities are worth pursuing and what assessors are actually looking for. AILSA is designed to bridge that gap so everyone in the funding system benefits. Mr. Meliani noted that despite the billions of pounds channelled through funding programmes each year, recent Innovate UK Smart Grant competitions, the government's flagship research and development support programme for SMEs, reported success rates of less than 3%. An estimated £200 million in available UK grant funding went unclaimed in the past year, with sector bodies noting that poorly applied AI is adding to assessment workloads without improving application quality. The rise in the number of grant applications produced by generative AI has reportedly placed increasing pressure on public funding assessment systems. Funding bodies and research councils are said to be actively monitoring AI's impact on application volumes and assessment processes, with some exploring the use of AI to manage review burdens. The UK deploys billions in grant funding each year, but the process connecting businesses to that capital is inefficient, Mr. Higgins said. AILSA's approach, combining AI with genuine assessment expertise, addresses a real structural problem in how that funding gets allocated. A veteran Scottish banker and former chief executive of Tesco Bank, Mr. Higgins has previously led retail banking at RBS and HBOS and helped integrate NatWest after one of the sector's largest hostile takeovers. He was appointed by the Scottish Government to design and advise on the creation of the Scottish National Investment Bank, including its governance and operating model for deploying public capital. Mr. Dolman is a chartered accountant who began his career at PwC before senior finance roles at ING and ABN AMRO. He was Chief Financial Officer at Starling Bank and then co-founder and Chief Financial Officer at Monzo, and now sits on the boards of multiple fintech startups and funds. Public funding plays a critical role in supporting innovation, but the system can be difficult to navigate, he said. Ailsa is addressing that challenge in a way that reflects how funding decisions are really made, using AI designed around the needs of real businesses. Based in Edinburgh, Ailsa has initially focused on grant funding, but plans to expand into procurement and international funding programmes in the near future. And that article was written by Christy Dorsey.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels, review, and tell your friends about our service.